This is Florida's West Coast, a strip of coastline stretching roughly 200 miles from Tampa Bay down to Fort Myers. On its own, each of these cities looks like a typical sunbelt metro. Tampa has its downtown and port. St. Petersburg has its waterfront and growing tech scene. Sarasota has its beaches and retirees. And Fort Myers, well, it has a lot of new subdivisions. But when you zoom out and look at what's actually happening along this corridor, something unusual starts to emerge. These cities aren't just growing independently. 5 million people. So why is Florida's West Coast merging into one massive urban system? And what makes this stretch of coastline so different from the rest of the state? To understand that, you have to go back to the mid-20th century. For most of its history, Florida's Gulf Coast was sparsely populated. Tampa was the only city of any real size, built around its port and cigar industry dating back to the 1880s. South of Tampa, there was very little, mostly small fishing villages, cattle ranches, and endless stretches of mangrove coastline. The population of the entire region was under 400,000 as late as 1950. That changed with two forces arriving almost simultaneously. The first was air conditioning. Before widespread residential AC in the 1950s and 60s, Florida's brutal summers kept most people away. The second was the interstate highway system. When I-75 was extended down Florida's west coast in the 1960s and 70s, it created a direct north-south spine connecting Tampa to Sarasota, then onward to Fort Myers and Naples. Suddenly, land that had been nearly inaccessible became prime real estate. And that brings us to the present. Tampa is the anchor of this entire corridor. 3 million, it's the second largest metro in Florida behind Miami, and the 15th largest in the United States. The city itself has roughly 400,000 residents, but the metro stretches across Hillsborough, Pinellas, Pasco, and Hernando counties. Between 2010 and 2023, the Tampa Metro added over 530,000 new residents, a growth rate of approximately 18%. And unlike many Sunbelt cities that grow almost entirely through suburban sprawl, Tampa has been actively densifying its core. The downtown area along the Hillsborough River has added over 12,000 new apartment units since 2015. $5 billion, 56-acre mixed-use project that has fundamentally reshaped the city's waterfront. But Tampa's growth doesn't stop at the city limits. Directly across Tampa Bay sits St. Petersburg, a city that for decades played second fiddle but has recently undergone one of the most dramatic urban turnarounds in Florida. St. $5 billion project that will transform 86 acres of parking lots and an aging stadium into a mixed-use neighborhood with 14,000 new residences. The city's population has climbed to around 265,000, and its median home price has jumped to approximately $380,000, up from $185,000 just 5 years ago. Meanwhile, about 60 miles south along I-75, the Sarasota-Bradenton Metro has been quietly becoming one of the fastest-growing regions in the country. 2%, ranking among the top 10 fastest-growing metros in the U.S. by percentage. The region now has about 890,000 residents. Once known primarily as a retirement destination, Sarasota has been attracting a much younger demographic in recent years. Remote workers, healthcare professionals, and small business owners have been drawn by the relatively lower cost of living compared to Miami, or even Tampa, combined with some of the highest-rated beaches in the country. And then there's the stretch everyone is watching. The 80-mile gap between Sarasota and Fort Myers used to be mostly empty rural land along I-75. But in the last decade, that gap has been filling in rapidly. Fort Myers itself has exploded, growing by roughly 36% since 2010 to reach a metro population of approximately 840,000. Suburbs like Estero, Bonita Springs, and Lehigh Acres have expanded so aggressively that you can now drive from Sarasota to Fort Myers on I-75 and see continuous development for most of the journey. The once clear boundary between these metros is disappearing. In total, if you combine the Tampa, St. 5 million people stretched along 200 miles of coastline, that would make it the fourth largest urban region in the United States, behind only the New York Metro, Los Angeles, and Chicago. And it's still growing at one of the fastest rates in the country. However, this kind of explosive growth comes with serious challenges. The first is transportation. This entire 200-mile corridor is almost entirely car-dependent. 5 million person megaregion, but that's exactly what it has become. Rush hour traffic between Tampa and Sarasota regularly backs up for miles, and the situation is getting worse every year. There is currently no passenger rail connecting any of these cities, though a proposal called Gulf Coast Rail has been discussed for years. Amtrak does not serve this corridor. The second challenge is climate risk. Florida's west coast sits directly in the path of Gulf hurricanes. In 2022, Hurricane Ian made landfall near Fort Myers as a Category 4 storm, causing over $110 billion in damage, and exposing just how vulnerable this rapidly growing region is. Insurance premiums have skyrocketed since then, with some homeowners seeing increases of 40 to 60% in a single year. The average annual homeowner's insurance premium in Florida now exceeds $4,200, roughly triple the national average. The third issue is housing affordability. What once attracted people to this coast, the affordable alternative to Miami, is quickly eroding. Median home prices in Tampa sit at approximately $375,000. In Sarasota, they've climbed to around $440,000. Even in Fort Myers, which was considered the affordable option, median prices now hover around $350,000. Back in 2019, those same Fort Myers homes were selling for about $230,000. That's a 52% increase in just 5 years. In short, Florida's West Coast is undergoing a transformation that few people outside the region fully appreciate. 4 separate metros are gradually merging into a single urban corridor, connected by highways, shared labor markets, and continuous suburban development. Whether this region handles its growth intelligently by investing in transit, building resilient infrastructure, and managing affordability, or simply continues to sprawl outward until the next hurricane reshuffles everything, will determine whether Florida's Gulf Coast becomes America's next great megaregion, or a cautionary tale of unchecked expansion.